Greetings adventurers and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. One thing that I will never understand is when the Game Master tries to flex how good they are at besting their players. When you can simply say, yeah, the cave collapses and your entire party is crushed, it isn't exactly impressive when you win. When the party is playing in survival mode and you're playing in creative mode, you're supposed to use those creative tools to make a fun but fair encounter that everyone can enjoy. If you're tweaking the encounter to be a guaranteed loss for the party just to inflate your ego, maybe it's time to play a solo player game. Today's treasure goes by the name Man Announces That He'll Show Everyone What It Means to Be a Real Dungeon Master, falls flat of expectations. Today's video is sponsored by CZEPEKU. When I made this YouTube channel, these guys were the sponsor that I wanted to have because I'm a longtime fan, and they've made my campaign preparation so much easier. You may already support them on Patreon because they make fantastic maps, scenes, and tokens. But did you know that they're all available now for the price of 2 subscriptions in one single bundle? Use the link below to grab the CZEPEKU Complete Fantasy Bundle and get 6,000 battle maps, 2,000 fantasy scenes, and 300 tokens that can be tweaked using their amazing token builder, meaning endless possibilities. Plus, more content is added every week. You can put together just about any scenario using this bundle in minutes and treat your party to beautiful hand-drawn assets that will blow them away. If you want to help support the channel, or you just want to use this amazing art on screen for your next game, click the link in the description below and support the bundle today. Now let's get back to the story. Once upon a time, when we were younger and quite inexperienced, we ran a few campaigns with various acquaintances. We played at our school RPG club and thus had no short supply of players, of very hit and miss caliber. My roommate, as well as I and some members of the group, would swap between being Dungeon Master about twice a week. While the game had its flaws, we still had fun aplenty. Nobody was stuck in a perma GM role, and things were always fresh, with various people bringing ideas to the table. Enter Bob. Bob was one of the newest recruits to the party, and he was kind of the player that would attempt to power game and play incredible characters only to fall flat. My roommate had a great knowledge of the rules and was himself the crown king of Munchkinism. If you showed up at his table with a combo that made you invincible, he explained to you in detail why stuff didn't stack, or you simply misread the abilities completely. Bob took that as a challenge, and one day announced that he himself would be running a special adventure where he could show us what it means to really Dungeon Master. He had a scenario ready that would test the limits of our knowledge and tactical abilities. He also created a level 80 wizard for the occasion, with celerity. This is Dungeons & Dragons, by the way. The rules are simple. We are all to be level 11, or something in that range, and anything is permitted. Anything, asked my roommate? Anything. You'll need it. Honestly, when I think of busted characters, I think of a character that's just disproportionately strong for their level. You know, you're like maximizing the potential that a level 11 wizard could be, for example. When you're a Dungeon Master and you can make them have infinite stats, why stop at level 80 if you're just going to make it ridiculous like this, you know? It just seems like a weird choice to me, and maybe it just kind of hints how much of an amateur he is. And this is kind of a side tangent. When you have a big bad evil guy, the main thing that's going to get him defeated by the party in a way you didn't expect really comes down to action economy. Remember, you have a big bad evil guy and he's really strong, but he only has a set amount of actions he can take per turn. And if the party's like 3 to 5 people, they're going to be taking collectively way more actions than your big bad evil guy. Maybe add some environmental factors that would be actively detrimental to the party if they encountered them, but aren't so much a risk to the big bad evil guy and maybe even his minions. But that's enough of a rant, and this guy's clearly a newbie, so let's just jump right back into the story. The invited players quickly split into 2 clans, Team Edgelord and Team Challenge Accepted. The members of Team Edgelord were very excited to show off their ultimate combos and races, and we ended up with such marvelous creations as Vampire, Samurai, Monk, Half Dragon, which sounds like it's a party combination, but it's merely one of the characters. Those were honest attempts and surely had strong racials and stats, but paled in comparison to what my roommate prepared. Some players saw him theorycraft and basically trusted him to build them an interesting pick. He started by making 2 generic clerics with special prestige classes, and their main reason to exist was that 1, they were totally immune to basically all mind effects, and 2, could remove such effects from the party, which would probably shut down a large amount of crap thrown at us. With heals, dispels, and counterspell at their disposal, they would form the backbone of our defensive setup. The true creation was a monstrosity and large ogre with a supreme cleave sleeve and a club way larger than it should be able to wield. Was it stupid? Yes. Was it technically legal? Dude, F if I know. I was no stranger to the game, but never really made a great character. In fact, I normally play a bard, and my own fun came from writing songs. And I would end up entering the challenge campaign as said bard, mostly because Inspire Courage is neat, and someone joined at the last minute. To them, I offered Virgil's character sheet. Virgil wasn't very smart, nor was he particularly charismatic. In fact, Virgil couldn't even speak. He didn't even have class levels. Virgil was, however, very good at grappling, because he was a colossal hamster. Okay, let's see where this is going. When a friend showed up to our session having heard the challenge, I offered him Virgil and simply played my bard. To disguise this surprise from the Dungeon Master, we used a polymorph spell on Virgil to pass him off as a human, although he was one that would constantly twitch and sniff around. For the whole 2 weeks that character creation took, some of us had doubts. Were we going too hard? However, every time we saw Bob, he would remind us that we were not ready for his amazing game, and soon we'd see what it's like to play with a real Dungeon Master. Thus, we marched on with our stat crunching. The great day comes. We were all greeted by a level 80 wizard named Bob, very original, the greatest wizard ever known, and that the wizard had conjured us to a magical hall for a feast to impart upon the most glorious of quests. It would soon become apparent that despite being twice the challenge rating of an actual deity, Bob the Wizard was not the most versed in the rules, but his ability to rewrite them on the fly had carried him to great heights of power. His first action was to ask us if any of us were under some magical effect or compulsion or even a curse. Since we were under the permanent ultra-powerful zone of truth emanating from Bob's armpits or whatever, we felt like we had to point out the twitchy human and say him. He has a magical polymorph on him. This all-powerful wizard, somehow not having mastered true seeing, proudly exclaimed, "Come forth, my protege, and be free from all your magical bonds." He instantly was crushed by his own feast hall, crumbling to pieces, as a normal-sized dude reverted to being twice the size of a building he was on. The table rejoiced at this beautiful first impression. Bob the Wizard kept his cool and simply wished the debris away and pretended to be unfazed. Bob the Dungeon Master attempted the same feat, however much less convincingly. We were immediately sent upon a quest to retrieve 4 elemental artifacts from incredible challenges. Only our intervention could stop dark forces from reuniting the orbs and doing a thing, an evil thing, to the world. Probably. The greatest adventure led by a true Dungeon Master was apparently very lacking in terms of build-up, flavor, or originality. But we were the 9 chosen heroes, so we departed on our quest to defeat hordes of monsters and gather our first item. Bob was very proud of his first gauntlet, an army of aquatic monsters attempting to swarm us. Sadly for him, any amount of creatures with less than 100 HP would be defeated instantly by our ogre berserker, so long as they at any point were within 60 feet of one another. Bob attempted to overwhelm us with yet more monsters, failing to understand the power of the ogre's supreme cleave, which basically makes you Darius from League of Legends. The challenges came and went. We sort of assumed that these impossible adventures would have puzzles, dungeons, lores, and traps. Nah, it was just a large amount of monsters that we had to travel to. After vanquishing enough hordes, we'd obtain a MacGuffin and bring it back to Bob, who would send us on another long trek to yet another orb. This went on for hours. This was meant to be a several weekend endeavor, but we were cruising through his minions faster than he could have anticipated. Bob, the greatest wizard in the world, asked us to get the 3rd orb. We asked for a teleport. Bob said no. We asked why. Bob said it was part of our challenge as the chosen heroes. We asked why didn't he just go grab it himself. Bob said he wouldn't do it because he was so powerful that intervening in the cross-country journey of cleave and crit would break the balance of the universe. We asked Bob for a teleport again, or we wouldn't do it. Bob said no. Bob decided to reveal his power and mind control our party into doing the quest. This worked except for the 2 clerics who simply dismissed his ability party-wide. We asked for a teleport. Bob said we would be retrieving the orbs or else. A quick glance across the table revealed our collective choice. People were very tired of this adventure and of Bob's failure to deliver the greatest adventure any player had ever seen. Many of them were Dungeon Masters themselves, who had hosted Bob, and felt like it was kind of a dick move to announce that he was going to show them what it's like to play with a real Dungeon Master. The verdict was passed. We had chosen or else. We were going to mess Bob up. I really hope you guys mean the wizard and not the player. He's just a bad Dungeon Master, guys. You don't have to take it that personal. I'm mainly just joking here, but we've had RPG horror stories where physical assault did take place, so you can never be too careful. Luckily, it's the wizard. Back to the story. Bob won initiative, for he had the vampiric discipline of celerity. We rolled with it, and so did our eyes. Learning from his previous mistake, Bob attempted to mind control and disable our party cleric so they wouldn't dispel his spells. This failed. He cast several spells and damages us. Cleric and Bard patched through the volley of arcane bullshit. Then came Virgil's turn. Virgil has lots of grapple bonuses. Bob does not. Bob is now grappled. On his turn, Bob invents new abilities, allowing him to evade the grapple and free himself from the hamster's bite. With several actions due to his celerity and other vampiric powers, as well as the ability to cast any spell, Bob the Wizard is still bound by the rules of the universe, as well as the Dungeon Master Bob's knowledge of the rules of the universe. The phrase, "you need a concentration check while grappled," or "you can't do that while grappled," became a finely owned weapon in our group's hands. Slowly but very surely, Bob the Wizard's HP goes down round after round. Bob's greatest challenge turns out to be his undoing, for in his own words, we should be prepared for the ultimate challenge that cannot be beaten. Defeated, he describes his character insert falling to our party, and attempts to turn this into somehow a victory for himself. Bob, as you finally vanquish the wizard, you can see the orb begin to turn dark. You have made a terrible mistake. By refusing the mighty wizard Bob's quest, you have doomed the world, and soon the orbs will be used for evil. You all will be killed by your decision. And Virgil's character responds, "I'd chew up the wizard's corpse and eat it." Yeah, at that point, I'm not really taking Bob's threats seriously, and I'd go for the shitpost myself, so shout out to Virgil, the giant hamster. You know, every once in a while I read an RPG horror story, and I'm not entirely sure if it's fake or not. This one, however, I totally believe is true because I've experienced something kind of similar in my own campaign. In college, we had a bunch of different tables playing D&D, and there was one individual who considered themselves a bit of a min-maxer, but they were the kind of person who would read something in a book and go, "Whoa dude, that's broken, and it totally works with this other thing here," even though everyone who was more experienced said, "Yeah, that's not how that works." So ultimately, when there was some scheduling conflicts and no other Dungeon Master was available, they decided to step up, take up the mantle, and the main quest giver was a self-insert, kind of like this Bob character. And if you guys have ever been at a table where the Dungeon Master just wants to play God mode and have you guys all talk about how cool his main character is, the best way to deal with it is to talk with them, be honest, say that you're not really having fun, and if they push back and explain that because their main character is super cool, the rest of the story doesn't matter, just let him play the campaign by himself. I'm sure eventually he'll get bored of Bob the Wizard as much as you guys were. This was one of the quicker stories, and I really do think Bob isn't that terrible of a person. He's just kind of insufferable behind the DM screen. Sometimes that same person too is awful as a player. You just notice it a little bit less because they're not necessarily the person in control of the campaign, so you don't really catch on to how bad their main character syndrome essentially is when they're not a DMPC. But ultimately, I feel like someone like Bob is annoying but ultimately harmless, which is a lot better than I can say for a lot of Dungeon Masters that we have on this channel. I'm really curious what you guys think about this story. Make sure to comment below your thoughts. Have you ever had someone like Bob the Wizard in your game, either as a player or as a Dungeon Master really? Make sure to like and share the video as it always helps the channel grow. And if you guys ever want to help the channel further, you can subscribe or become a member. I appreciate you guys coming by, and as always, I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now.